Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. As always, we begin with appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for giving us a worldwide platform to promote Torah all over the world. Also to Kol HaLashon for its global network, for YouTube, for Torah Communications Network, our Zoomers, our subscribers, and those of you that are with us here in our flagship station, Agris Sobei Zev of Fairways Lakewood. We have two special sponsors tonight. Both received very much the last moment, and I'll do it in order of its being received. The first sponsor is my dear Talmud, Victor Fried. Victor and Mindy are my Talmidim for as long as I was in Staten Island, so it's more than 43 years, and there was a time that I gave the Daf Yomi Friday night in their home on Niles Place, a very well-known home because it's the address of the Bikur Cholim of Staten Island, and Victor is sponsoring the shir in appreciation for the shir, and with the hope that everybody should have a refuah shalema that needs it, and that we all should join him in Eretz Yisrael with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mehera v'yameinu. The shir is also sponsored by our dear Zoomer, Rabbi Kaniel, who is sponsoring it for an interesting tefillah. It's a prayer to Hashem in the schus of the shir that they should have atzlacha in Great Neck for the speedy rebuilding of the beloved shul, the Saddle Rock Minyan. They should get their necessary permits, and the shul should go up and flourish again, in Yirtzeh Hashem, to fly soon to Eretz Yisrael with all the other shuls of America. Again, if you would like to sponsor a shir, 718-916-3100. Text me, 718-916-3100, or email me at rmmwsi@aol.com. Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. These are the children of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram holides Yitzchak. Avram begat Yitzchak. Now that's a strange statement. And I mean, we know already the story. It was pretty miraculous that Sarah and Avram had Yitzchak. Why is it repeating over here? Avram holides Yitzchak. So Rashi tells us the story. Rashi tells us that the Litzonei Hadar, the cynics, the mockers, they said, well, Avram was living with Sarah all this time, and they never had children. It's more likely that when Avimelech abducted Sarah, so she became pregnant from Avimelech. And that was, a good piece of mockery, when it has a little bit of credibility. It was 100 years old. All this time they were married. Avram was 25 when he married Sarah at 15. So they were married like, a quarter of a century, and he didn't have children with her, and then she spent the night with Avimelech. What do you think? So what did Hashem do to dispel the scoffers? He changed the facial appearance of Yitzchak to look exactly like Avram. So therefore everybody knew that Avram holides Yitzchak. So there's an obvious question over here. When you learn a Rashi, you have to think. The obvious question is, why didn't Hashem make Yitzchak look like Avram when he was born? Why do you have to make such a miraculous thing to change his facial features? All of a sudden, presto, he looks different. He looks like Avram. Just let Yitzchak look like Avram from birth. then there would be nothing for the scoffers to say, and it's a simple solution. Why do we know that Hashem doesn't make miracles bichdi. If he doesn't need to make miracles. So it could be, genetics have it that a baby looks like his father. So let him be born like his father initially. Why did he have to make such a miracle that afterwards he changed his facial features? So one answer that came to my mind is that Hashem wanted to show that the scoffers were fools. Hashem wanted, this was a world in flux, where Avram was trying to, bring a lot of people to the ways of Hashem. So this was a way that Hashem should show that the scoffers that they're fools and don't listen to these people. That's one possibility. The other possibility that came to my mind is, as of yet, old age was not created. Old age was created later. So making Yitzhak look like Avram would not be very convenient, because then people will confuse Yitzhak and Avram. And Yitzhak and Avram had different ways of avodas Hashem. Yitzhak was din, Yitzhak was gevura, Avram was chesed. So to have them confused would not be so good. So initially Hashem didn't want to do that. But now I'm going to tell you what I think is the most likely answer. And I was clued in by this, although the Sifsei Chachamim doesn't ask my question. But with this Divrei David is a very chashuv sefer on Rashi, which the Sifsei Chachamim quotes. You see, if Yitzhak was born looking like Avram, the scoffers would have still scoffed. Because we know that when a woman has relations, what she thinks about in her mind can determine the appearance of the child. For example, we have stories of Rishonim that would put beautiful Jews by their beds while they mated, so that the children should look like them. We know, we'll learn about it with Yaakov, that when Yaakov said that to Lavan, that let all the polka-dotted and speckled sheep be mine, so then he took pieces of wood and he cut them in a way that they looked speckled and polka-dotted, and put it in front of the sheep when they mated, and the children became polka-dotted. So the scoffers would still say, yeah, Avimelech was with Sarah, but she was thinking about her husband. She was obviously forced, so she was thinking about her husband, and that's why the baby looks like that. It wouldn't be a good enough proof. The only way it was a proof is that Hashem changed his appearance afterwards. Oh, I changed his appearance afterwards. Such a miracle showed to everyone that Avram holded as Yitzchak. But now let me say to you, and I said it earlier by the daf, but since we have now the wider olam for the Chumash year, I want to give a second bracha. This morning I had the privilege of being a sandik for my children, Maishi and Devorah Schwartz, and as a sandik I'm vested to give brachas. So I want to give everybody, my viewers, my listeners, a bracha, that Hashem should give you what I consider the greatest of brachas. Hashem should give you that you should be able to live with menuchas hanefesh. But of course it should be menuchas hanefesh according to the Torah of Hashem. So I actually said this word when I spoke by the bris. There's a Medrash Tanchuma The Medrash Tanchuma says that this wasn't the only time in the history of mankind where Hashem did such a unique miracle to change a child's features after the child was born. There was this time by Yitzchak, and the other time was by the righteous Kilov, not Kalev, Kilov, who, if you know your history, Kilov was the son of David. And it was the son of David and Abigail. And once again, the scoffers, who are always looking, they're always looking to wag their tongues, the scoffers said that Kilov was not David's son, but was born from Abigail's first husband, Novel HaKarmel. So in order to dispel that Kilov was the son of the wicked Novel, his name was Novel, you can imagine with a name like Novel, same root as Nevela, right? In order to dispel that notion, so Hashem changed the features of Kilov that it should look like David HaMelech. And the Tanchuma says, and that's why his name was Kilov, to show you that he was kuloi of. He looked entirely like his father. Now it could be, there's two speculations. It could be, this is not said, it could be that Hashem changed his features before the bris, and therefore they gave him the name Kilov after that miracle, that he looked kulei of, he looked all like his father. Or he could have changed it after the bris, and Shma Gorim, a name foretells a person's destiny. But there's much more in this name. First of all, there's a Gemara in Brachas Daf Dalet. The Gemara in Brachas Daf Dalet says that in praise of David, that although he was the king, and the king, you know, a king has Saim Tosim Alecha Melech. A king has a stolz. But he humbled himself before Mephibosheth, his Rebbe. David HaMelech humbled himself before his Rebbe Mephibosheth, although he was king. And the Gemara tells us, Mida Keneged Mida, he was given a son, Kilov, who embarrassed Mephibosheth in halacha. In other words, he bested Mephibosheth in halacha, and that's why it's Kilov, because it means Kilov is hichlim of. He shamed, so to speak, his father in learning. He bested his Rebbe in learning. That's another meaning of Kilov. But there's more. I told you that Kilov was a legendary fellow. The Gemara tells us 4 people died be'ityoy shel nachash. 4 people died only because of the decree of death to mankind, because of the sin caused by the nachash. Otherwise, these people would not have died because they never sinned. Like, for example, one of those people was Binyamin. Binyamin never sinned. Another person was Kilov, the son of David. Kilov never sinned. And that's why he was called Kilov. Because kuloi of, he was entirely like his father in heaven. His father in heaven never sinned, Hashem never sinned, and he never sinned. But I'll tell you something even more. You know who was one of the other people that never sinned? David HaMelech's father, Yishai. And since B'nai Banim Harihein Kebanim, grandchildren are like children, so therefore, he was Kulayav, he was like his Zayda. He was like his Zayda Yishai. He never sinned either. Since we're talking about this great trio, imagine, Yishai, David, and Kilov, Rav Miller made an interesting observation. Rav Miller said Yishai never sinned, and Kilov never sinned. David sinned. But David is mentioned over 1,000 times in Tanakh. We know very little about Kilov, and not so much about Yishai. We know Yishai was a tremendous Marbitz Torah. It says Yishai was nichnas b'uchlusa v'yatza b'uchlusa. He went in the morning and came out with 600,000 Talmidim. I always think about that. That's 6 times MetLife Stadium. Always think about that. That was Yishai. But Ramila said Yishai and Kilov never sinned. But we hear about David Melech 1,000 times. He says, when you get involved in do for the public, you're going to sin. But the Rebbeinu Shalom wants you to get involved and do for the public. We need a David HaMelech. V'rav yavod tzo'ir. Rivka is given the nevuah. She goes to shame what's going on inside, that she has this internal struggle inside her. And she's told, V'rav yavod tzo'ir, that the older one will serve the younger one. So the Welt says, sometimes a lesson is plugged into a pasuk. So the Welt says, it's in the Sefer Ber Asada, he says, if you want to be a Rav, then Yavo Itzar, you have to work when you're young. You want to be a Rav? You have to work when you're young. I mean, I'm a small-time Rav, but in order for me to do so, I learned in yeshiva from the age of 13 till I got married, and I dormed in the yeshiva, and there were winters that they tell me that there was a heavy snow, and I didn't even know if it snowed, because I never left the building. A whole winter. If you want to be a Rav, you have to be Yavoid when you're Tsar. Okay, that's a nice little piece of advice. But now let me tell you something remarkable that Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the venerable Rav of Yerushalayim, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, Schus Yagan Aleinu, says, Rivki Meina was having terrible pain. But they were fighting inside her. She was all of a sudden an arena, and she was having terrible pain. She said, Lama ze anoichi, I prayed so much, what's going on over here? Vatelech lidra ishes Hashem. So she went to the Beis Medrash of Shem, and Shem told her this nevuah, v'rav yavo itzar. The older one will serve the younger one. You see, she was having a problem because every time they passed the church, Esav wanted to come out. Every time they passed a yeshiva, a shul, Yaakov wanted to come out. Says Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, as soon as Shem said, V'rav yavo itzar, they stopped trying to come out. Because whoever would come out first would have to serve the younger one. So they stopped they stopped fighting. That's what Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld says. The Maisa is, they ask a very big kasha on this vart of, it's very brilliant. But they ask a very big kasha because when it says V'yoda yoichezes ba'akev Esav, the Yaakov, when Esav was coming out, he was holding on to the heel of Esav. So they ask, Rashi says, why? Because Yaakov was trying to stop him from being born first, so that he should get the Bechayra legally. But according to Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, nobody wanted to be born first because they knew the nevuah of V'rav yavo itzar. So that's a kasha on this pshat of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. But I should tell you that And those that hear my shiurim have heard this from me in the past, but I want to elaborate on it, and I think it's worth repeating. If you look at Rashi, when it says that they called him Yaakov, Vayikra Shmo Yaakov, Rashi says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem called him Yaakov. In other words, Yaakov was not given by, the name Yaakov was not given by Yitzhak and Rivka. The name Yaakov was divinely given. Now, I want to explain to you why that is. Because in the name Yaakov are things that a human being could not know. You see, by the bris, Yitzchak said, Rabbi say, let me tell you the names of my children. This is Esav. He's called Esav because Asu, he's completely made. He was born with a beard. He was born with front teeth, back teeth. Also, the Balaturim says that Esav is the same gematria. Esav is 376. It's the same gematria as Shalom. It was the hope by giving Esav a name that was gematria Shalom, it would rein in his more violent tendencies. And then he says, and let me tell you why I'm calling my second son Yaakov. Now, I don't know if it's not an idiom used anymore. The younger people who don't know what a rotary phone is might not know this, but there used to be something called Kodak film. You heard of Kodak? Kodak.
Kodak moment.
Yeah. So Yitzhak said, Rabbi said there was a Kodak moment in the delivery room. So quaint. My son Esav came out, and my son Yaakov was holding on to his heel. And because of that, I called him Yaakov. Yoda Yochezes Bakev Esav. And you see the people in the bris, they're saying, what is he talking about? Kodak moment. Heels, who names a child for a heel, holding a heel? What's that all about? If he was holding his elbow, we would call him elbow. I mean, what's that all about? So in a beautiful pshat, the Tur on Chumash, the Paneach Raza, the Dazakain and Balei Taisus all say, it's really rather remarkable, that we see from the beginning Yaakov Avinu's chesed. Yaakov saw that Esav was being born. He knew that his mother would have to go again through the pain of another delivery. So in order to save his mother pain, he came out, hold on to the heel, and came out as one in order to save his mother pain. And in memory of that chesed of Yaakov, that sensitivity, he was called Yaakov. And by the way, this gives you an idea why throughout the world, most girls' schools are called Beis Yaakov. Because it's a house of chesed. Yaakov symbolizes, this symbolizes chesed. Now, at the same time, Yaakov was doing another chesed for his mother. Because we know it says, Vayetze Harishain Admoni. And he was called Edom. And the Mefarshim say, what was the blood? Edom is dam. The Mefarshim say that Yaakov, that Esav did not want to share the Yerusha with any more children. So he took his heel and he destroyed his mother's womb. So therefore, although Rivka was not yet 23, she would never have children again. So Yaakov was trying to stop that. Yoda Yechezes Ba'akeves was trying to stop it. He couldn't stop it because Esav was much stronger. But then, after destroying his mother's womb, Esav then had a further idea. He saw the little fontanelle of Yaakov, and he said, let me smash in his head, and then there'll be no competition. Then I'll get everything. And he was much more mighty, and he was coming down hard with his heel. He was a man. Yaakov was a baby. But Hashem made a miracle, Yoda Yochezes Ba'akev Esav, that he was able to hold it and stave it off. Now, remember I pointed out to you that Rashi says that these names were given by, the name Yaakov was given by Hashem. Because we couldn't know that Yaakov had sensitivity for his mother's pain. It happened in vitro. We couldn't know that Esav had murderous intent. It's only because Hashem gave the name. Now there's a third implication of the name, which is very important, and that is that Yaakov is a sign for the future. That Rome and Edom will hold powerful on Klal Yisrael throughout the ages. But Yoda Yochezes Ba'akev, Akev, the heel, is the end. In the end, Yaakov will best Esav. But it'll only happen Ba'akev, at the end. So that's another lesson from Yaakov. Now we've already heard about Esav's murderous intent. But how far it goes is really very interesting. It says, Vayetze Harishan Admoini, the first one came out red. Now red, all over the world, a stop sign is red. Red is the universal sign of danger. So when it says, Vayetze Harishan Admoini, Rashi says, Siman Shu Shofet Damen. That's a sign that he would be a murderer. He wanted to murder his own brother. He would be a murderer. But look how far it goes. The Medrash Avakir, this is so fascinating. The Medrash Avakir tells us that when he was in his mother's womb, Esav drank the menstrual blood of Rivka. He drank the dam nidus of Rivka. Now what kind of a bizarre Medrash is that? That he drank the menstrual blood. So Rav Mindus explains, thank God we have these Gedolim to explain things to us. The Gemara tells us that dam nechar v'nasa chalav, that the blood congeals and becomes the mother's milk. He therefore drank his mother's milk, his mother's blood, that she shouldn't be able to produce milk. Yaakov would then die because she couldn't nurse him. He was okay because he already had teeth. So he was okay. So he went that far to drink his mother's blood in order that she shouldn't be able to produce milk, in order that Yaakov should die. And it's really interesting because the only one of the matriarchs that had a wet nurse was Rivka. It says, Vatamas Devoira Meinekes Rivka, because she needed a wet nurse because she couldn't produce the milk after what he did. Yaakov was a perfect man. Rashi says he wasn't like Esav. He wasn't a deceptive person. He was a straight person. Yoshev Oholim, dwelling in tents. Now today, when you say Yoshev Oholim, you might think it means that he has a house in Boca and a house in Brooklyn, or maybe a house in Yerushalayim, but that's not what it means. Rashi says Yoshev Ohalim means the Oalei Shem Ve'eva, that he dwelled in the tents of Shem Ve'eva. They went to yeshiva, Shem Ve'eva. So the Ksav Sofer over here, the Ksav Sofer asks an obvious question. Why did he go to Shem Ve'eva? He had a father, a great Talmud Chacham like Yitzchak. Why didn't he learn from Yitzchak? Why did he have to go to Shem Ve'eva? And we know that Shem Ve'eva petered out. When we went down to Mitzrayim, it was only at 70 people. Shem Ve'eva, the whole academy petered out. Why did he go to Shem Ve'eva? Why didn't he learn with Yitzchak? It's a very big question. So, the teretz that the Welt gave is that he didn't want to be in proximity to Esav. He knew that Esav, the influence of Esav was toxic. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the Pasha, it says, "Vayitzroitzesu abanim bekirba," that they were running. So whenever they passed a church, Esav wanted to go out. Whenever they passed yeshiva, Yaakov wanted to go out. So they asked, we understand why Esav wanted to go out, but Yaakov was learning from the Malach. Why did he want to go out? He was learning from a Malach. The Gemara Nida says a baby learns from a Malach. You don't get anywhere outside a Malach. So there are all kinds of answers. One answer is that Yaakov wanted to lilmoid al malas lasais. He wanted to already be able to do, or he wanted to be lilmoid al malas lamed, to teach. But the famous answer is he wanted out because he didn't want to be proximity to Esav. So the answer they say is that he went to Shem Ve'eva not to be in the toxic surroundings of Esav. And this is something that we learned. The Rambam always says a person has to know that a person is mushpa from their environment. You have to be very careful to pick your friends wisely. They say that the Chofetz Chaim made a Sudas Haidah, that he realized that a friend was no good, and that friend could have had a terrible influence on him. And he made a Sudas Haidah when he realized that mistake. But there's something else going on over here. I'm going to tell you something that's, if it wouldn't be about the Avos HaKadoshim, and if it wouldn't be that we're hearing it from such heavenly people, it would be almost incredible to believe. The Chidah brings down from Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. The Chidah brings down from Rabbi Yehuda Chassid that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov learned together b'chavrusa for 15 years. Now, this is, maybe put it away. This is especially incredible when you do the arithmetic. It's very simple arithmetic. Avram was 100 when Yitzchak was born. Yitzchak was 60 when Yaakov was born. And Avram lived till 175. So for Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov to live together, to learn together for 15 years, that means that Yaakov would have to be learning from the day that he was born. It's simple arithmetic. I'll go it over you again. Avram was 100 when Yitzchak was born. Yitzchak was 60 when Yaakov was born. So that means that when Yaakov was born, Avram was 160. If Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov would learn together for 15 years, that means that Yaakov started learning the day that he was born. No wonder he wanted to come out. And therefore, now that explains V'Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev V'Yohalim. as soon as Avram passed away. Now, when did Avram pass away? It says he died 5 years earlier not to see Esav go Latar B'Sra, go off the derech. So when Esav went off the derech, so now, and he finished learning. He did learn with his father. He learned with his grandfather. He learned 15 years. After that, he went to the yeshiva of Shem Ve'aver. So the chronological order fits perfectly. It's interesting, though. We know now Yaakov had another amazing period of his life. By the way, don't be so surprised that he learned the first day. There's a medrash that says on the day Moshe Rabbeinu was born, he was already walking and talking with his parents. But it means that Yaakov had 15 years of Gan Eden on this world. Besides the 14 years that he spent learning in Shem Ve'aver, he had these 15 years when he learned together with Abraham and Yitzchak. And yet, in Parshas Vayechi, it tells us that the gematria of Vayechi is 34, because the only real good years of Yaakov's life was the 17 years he had with Yosef before he was sold, and the 17 years that he had with Yosef in Mitzrayim. That's 34. What about these 15 years? What about the 14 years in Shem Ve'aver? Gan Eden on this world. The answer is yes, but those aren't called full life because he wasn't married. If you're not married, it's only a half. The 17 years in Mitzrayim, he was still married. He was married to Bilhah. It's interesting. The Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Aholim. So the Klei Yoker says, what's the lashon of Tom? Klei Yoker says that he was Noilid Mahal. He was born circumcised. So that's meaning Tom. He was already perfect. He was born circumcised. And then that's another meaning in Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Aholim. Aholim is a reference to marital life. Like it says, they were told afterwards, Shuvu lachem la'aleichem. You could go back to your wives. And because he was circumcised from birth, and his lust was controlled, that's why he was happy only with his oyalim. Now, I want to tell you that Bilam was given prophecy. He was like Moshe Rabbeinu in prophecy. And he said, Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov. There's a triple meaning in Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov. One is, of course, oil we said is the oil of learning. And Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov was Yaakov's greatness in learning. Right? It says, Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Aholim. Yaakov was the Av of Torah. That's why Yaakov Vinu Loi Meis, because the Malchamavas couldn't get near it ever. And Toiv is Torah. Lekach Toiv Nosati Lachem. Torasi Altas. That's one of the meanings of Matovu Alechi Yaakov that Bilam saw. The beauty of Torah in the Yiddish house. What a beauty. Second meaning of Matovu Alecha is that Yaakov had 4 wives. It's not easy to have one wife. He had 4 wives, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. And he lived with peace with them. Matovu Alecha Yaakov. Bilam saw the beauty of the Jewish marriage. That's Toiv. Toiv is a wife. Matzah Isha Matzah Toiv. Loi Toiv Yaisa Adam Levada. That's the second meaning. The third meaning is what else is Toiv? Whenever we bench, Hazones ha'olam kulai b'tuvai. Hashem supports the whole world with His goodness, with bread. Bilam saw Matovu Alecha Yaakov, how all those years Yaakov worked for Lavan Ha'arami with complete honesty. He said, I didn't let sleep come to my eyes. With complete honesty. That's also taif. That's also the integrity of the Jewish people. Vayav Yitzchak es Esav kitzayid b'fiv. Yitzchak loved Esav kitzayid b'fiv. So the Shach, now this is way ahead of its time. This is 500 years ago. Shach was one of the Gurei Ho'ari. This is not the Shach on Shulchan Aruch. This is the Shach on the Torah. He was one of the star Talmidim of the Arizal. So the Shach says, Vayav Yitzchak es Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav kitzayid b'fiv, because Esav was deceptive. He was a con man, and he caught him with his words. And he asked him, how do you take meiser from salt? How do you... all kinds of frumah questions. Asks the Shach, could it be possible that Yitzchak, who was a tremendous Navi, he didn't see through Esav? Could it be? So the Shach says, and he says this, it's so contemporary today. He says this over 500 years ago. It's more than 500 years ago. Vayav Yitzchak es Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav kitzayid b'fiv, because he trapped him with his mouth. And he tricked Esav into believing that he saw only the good in him. Because Yitzchak knew that without his love, Esav would be much worse. So what did he give him? He gave him love. This is today. Today, anybody that knows anything, we should never be tested with a child off the derech. They call them now kids in pain. You know how many children are committing suicide? But if a parent knows, it's easy to say, it's very hard to do. I'm not saying it's not hard. But if a parent knows that love will only be the only way to address the person. Kitzayid b'fiv, to the contrary. We think that Esav conned Yitzchak. Yitzchak conned Esav. And he showed him love in order to get the most that he could out of him. What a contemporary lesson. Now, I say this, although it doesn't sound respectful. And if the Torah wouldn't say it, I wouldn't, chas v'shalom, be able to say it. But it's a Rashi. What does Rashi say? Vayav Yitzchak es Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav. Kitzayid b'fiv, because Esav prepared him his food. And nobody made a delicious lamb chops and potatoes like Esav. Nobody made a homemade blintzes like Esav. So Vayav Yitzchak es Esav kitzayid b'fiv. And the road to a man's stomach, the Gemara says, the road to a man's heart is through his stomach. Now let's think about this. Rashi says this. I mean, could you imagine if I told you that Rav Palm, he loved this cook in the yeshiva, although he was not such a nice fellow, because did he make a delicious stuffed cabbage? You would say that's the way you talk about Rav Paul? But that's the way it talks about Yitzchak, our father. Vayav Yitzchak es Esav, he loved Esav because Kitzayid Befiv, because he made a great lasagna, a great eggplant parmesan. Since the Torah is doing this, it's because it's teaching us how to train our daughters. It's very important for a young lady to know how to cook. Because you see that cooking food could cause one to overlook blatant problems. Yitzhak overlooked blatant problems in Asa because Asa prepared him food. It's telling us that it's a very important talent for a wife to have, to know how to cook. And it will overcome that her husband shouldn't see other flaws. I know I heard from Rabbi Ruvain Feinstein, I heard this. I once told him that a girl came to me in my shul. She was in the 12th grade. She was given an assignment on the Diglei HaMidbar, and the banners of the Midbar, and to the different opinions of the Ramban and others, and she asked me if I could help her on it. And I said to tell her the truth, I don't know it. And I mentioned it to Reb Ruvain, and Reb Ruvain says, why are they teaching her Diglei Midbar? They should be teaching her culinary skills. That's what Reb Ruvain said. What does a girl have to know the different pshatim in the Diglei Midbar? A girl has to know learning. She should be an expert in Pirkei Avos. She should be an expert in Chovos Halvavos. A girl has to know. She definitely has to know. She has to know Hilchos Shabbos. She has to know Hilchos Lashon Hara. She doesn't have to learn the Diglei Midbar. Better to teach her culinary skills. Like we see over here. It's a road to a man's heart. It's through his stomach. Vatichena einav meira'os. And Yaakov's eyes became dim from seeing. That's why they were able to orchestrate that Yaakov was able to get the brachas. Yitzchak wasn't able to see. So the word here, I'm telling you this to show you the secrets of the Torah. Secrets of the Torah. The word meira'os is written chaser vav. It's written mem reish aleph saf. It should be mem reish aleph vav saf. But it's meira'os. It's called chaser. It's defective. It's written mem reish aleph saf. Says the Paneach Raza, Paneach Raza is a Rishon, that the word meira'os without the vav, if you scramble the letters, it also reads Es-Ram. Es-Ram, the one on high. Explains the Paneach Raza that when Yitzchak was bound on the Akedah, and Avram had the knife poised to shecht him, it was a moment before his life, a moment before a person's life, they see the Shekhinah. So Yitzchak saw Es-Ram. And it says, V'lo yirani ha'adam b'cha, you can't see God and live. So when he saw the Shekhinah, he lost his sight. And that's why it says, Vatichena ein of meira'os. Meira'os is the letters Es-Ram. By the way, that's why when Moshe Rabbeinu was by the burning bush, it says, Ki yorei mehabit. He turned away, he was afraid to look, because you're not supposed to look at the Shekhinah. We know this already. This is historical. The first time a person was damaged by looking at the Shekhinah, the island doesn't know this. Most of the island doesn't know it. It's a Sefer Chassidim. Hevel had to die because when the fire came down and licked up his carbon, Hevel looked at the fire. And the fire contained the Shekhinah. That's why Hevel's a Lashon Havla. He looked at the heat of the Shekhinah. This was the reason why they were told when they were running from Sodom, Al Tabid Acharecha. Don't look back. Because the Shekhinah was destroying Sodom. Lot's wife Edith looked back, she died. That's why it says in the Torah, that the night of Makas Becharos, we weren't allowed to go outside. Why? Because the Shekhinah was coming. Ani v'lo malach, ani v'lo saraf, ani v'lo shliach. They couldn't look at the Shekhinah, they would have died. So as soon as Chashiv Kameis, so Yitzhak became blind. That's a type of death. But that's Meira'os is Esram. She'll say, wow. Remember I told you that the Chachamim are Ikrei Seifrim. The sages are called counters. Because they were able to know, without computers, Meira'os is exactly B'Gematria 787. You know what is 787? Gam Shekibel Sheichad. Also because he accepted bribery. Says the Paneach Raza, because Yitzchak, so to speak, took bribery, the food from Esav, Kitzayid Befiv, and it let it bribe him. So it says, HaShoiched Ya'aver Einei Pikrim. Bribery blinds the eyes of Pikrim. So that's another reason why he was blind. And that's in the word also, Meira'os, without the Vav. It's B'Gematria 787, Gam Shekibel Sheichad. But wait, it's not finished. I mean, it's an amazing thing. These great people, they were Ikrei Seifrim. You know what else is 787? Mikayach ba'oshen avodah zara. Because it says one of the reasons that he went blind is from the smoke of the idols of Esav's wives. It's all in the word. It's all in one word, Meira'os. For the last thought of the evening, before I do, I want to thank our sponsors, Avigdor Fried and Rabbi Kaniel. Avigdor, in honor of the shir and the learning. Rabbi Kaniel for the speedy rebuilding and for permits and successful start again for the Saddle Rack Minyan in Great Neck. If you would like to sponsor next week's share, 718-916-3100. Rivka told one thing to Yaakov and something else to Yitzchak. She said to Yaakov, you got to get out of here. Your brother wants to kill you. Go to Lavan, the family. You have to run for your life. That's not what she told Yitzchak. She said, Katzti b'chayai mipnei b'nais ches. I don't want my son marrying. Let him go to our family, to Besuel and Lavan, and get married over there. It begs the question, why didn't she tell her husband, I'm afraid? Esav is upset that he didn't get the firstborn, and he's voiced murderous intentions against Yaakov. I want him to be safe. Why didn't she tell that to her husband? She's prevaricating with her husband? It's a big question. One of the bedrocks of marriage is truth. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh asks the question, and he gives a scary answer. He says, to tell Yitzchak about Esav is rechilas. It's type of Lashon Hara. Since he could get Yaakov to go for a different reason, just to say about Esav is rechilas. It's Lashon Hara. To tell Yaakov, he had to tell Yaakov because that's lo yisamad al dam re'echa. You have to protect someone. Now this Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, it's just a reminder how careful we have to be when speaking about family. We're always saying it's l'to'eles. I mean, we would think that it's a to'eles to tell a husband, I think Esau wants to kill Yaakov, you think. But if it's not necessary, you have to know, you have to ask yourself if it's necessary. You know where else we saw that talking about family, even by great people, was a problem? By Miriam. It's one of the Sheish Zechiras. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam, because Miriam said, that Moshe Rabbeinu is not intimate with his wife, Tzipporah, she's not putting on makeup anymore. You can't talk about family. It's very dangerous to talk about family. That's one answer. I want to propose another answer. And I learned this from a Rishon. You see, the Paneach Raza asks when Rivka was having this crazy internal in vitro struggle and passing a church and passing a shul. So it says, "Vatelech lidroish es Hashem." She went to the Beis Medrash of Shem. But there was a bigger gadol. There was a bigger gadol. Her shver, Avram Avinu. Why didn't she ask Avram Avinu? So the Paneach Raza says she didn't ask Avram not to be mitzar him. She didn't want to tell Avram that he has. It looks like he has a grandson that's interested in Avodah Zarah. And it makes sense because Avram would die 5 years earlier in order not to see Esav go off the derech. Right? That's how bad it is for a parent to see a child go off the derech. Now, using this, we could say that that's why she didn't tell Yitzchak. If she could avoid being mitzar Yitzchak, that one son wants to kill the other son, she didn't want to be mitzar Yitzchak. Big thing. To avoid causing somebody tsar is a very big thing. There's a Baal Taisvis, one of the Baal Taisvis, was called the Bechar Shar. He gives another answer. It's a scary answer. He says she was afraid that if she would tell him the reason, Yitzchak would get angry and say, no, my Esav would not do that, and he wouldn't let Yaakov go. Because he wouldn't want to show that he approves of this reason. And that's why she didn't tell the reason. But I want to conclude with what I think is a fourth plausible reason. She didn't tell him because she knew it was advantageous that Yitzchak should continue giving love to Esav. If she would tell him that Esav wants to murder Yaakov, it would be hard for him to continue giving love to Esav. And she knew that it was the divine plan, that she was the one that was made aware of Esav's intent from what happened in her womb, from the destruction of her womb. Remember, I told you she fell off the camel because she was shown about Esav. Yitzchak wasn't given. So she said, I'm going to keep Yitzchak unaware. He should continue. And it was very important that Yitzchak should show love to his grandson, Esav's son Eliphaz. Because remember, when Eliphaz was sent to kill Yaakov, he took all of Yaakov's clothing instead and made him poor, and he didn't kill him. Why? Because it says he grew up on the lap of Yitzchak. It's very important for that love there to be, and therefore she didn't want to take away that love. As always, I want to thank everybody for joining us and wish you a wonderful Shabbos.